People who never experienced abuse from their parents sometimes have a hard time understanding the complicated and nuanced emotions that so many people with CPTSD feel when it comes to their relationship with parents. Some people cut off contact forever and feel that that brings them healing and empowerment at last. Other people cut off contact and then later reconsider that choice and maybe have some kind of reconciliation. Some people think that they probably should cut off contact, but they haven't. And other people continue to hope that if they can be strong enough and persistent enough, that a healing in that important but damaged relationship with a mother or father can be healed. And those are all valid. The more I teach and coach the people in my programs, and the more I read letters from people like you, the more my heart goes out to everybody who has suffered trauma as a kid and who struggles with this question now. And I'm humbled to learn what some people have gone through and to witness how loving and capable you are, and for better or worse, how strong the bonds of love can be between a parent and child. So the letter I'm reading today comes from a woman I'll call Veronica. And like I do with all letter writers, I did a little search online just to verify who this person is, who they say they are. I always do that. And Veronica, I discovered, is this amazing artist who creates extraordinary images and portraits of people, hundreds of works, each of them revealing something beautiful or fierce or poignant in the subject, in the way they hold themselves, in their expressions of hope. And I've never mentioned this kind of background in my letter writers, and I hope Veronica doesn't feel invaded, but I just want to set it as a backdrop for this story where she doesn't mention this, but it's a testament to the validity of how she thinks, all right? I always want to protect and defend everybody who sends a letter because it's incredibly courageous to share your story with the whole YouTube community. There's always going to be these jerks who come in and go, "Oh, why don't you just forget about it and toughen up, Cookie?" You know, that whole thing. And we ignore them. We often delete them. Other people, respond to them. I prefer that they didn't come at all, but I invite you, every time you hear a letter read, to send your love and encouragement to the person who shared the letter. These are real letters, they're real people, they're in the community, and they read what people write in response. So for Veronica, I wanted you to know that about her, and now I'm going to tell you what she told me. Dear Fairy, my birth mother left when I was 1 year old. Around the same time, my father's dad passed away. It was a traumatic time for my father. She left him for another man who ended up becoming her pimp. She had visitation rights, but never used them. It was forbidden to ever say her name, ask questions about her, or acknowledge her existence in any way. My older brother and I were told that she's not here because she doesn't love you and she doesn't want to be your mom. I think this satisfied some sort of vengeful impulse in my dad, but it only wounded us very deeply. All photos of her were absent from photo albums. I had no idea what she looked like. My only reference to her was when my father would punish me for making the robin face. I was an extremely shy, soft-spoken girl who lived to make her dad proud. Upsetting him was horrifying to me, so being the reason my father suddenly burned with disgust and sent me to my room had a huge impact on me. I'd look in the mirror and cry, making faces and trying to imagine which expression was the wrong one. Still to this day, I have no idea what the face is, and truth be told, I have to manage a very visceral degree of disgust when I see her resemblance. I now know what she looks like when I see it in my photos or reflection. In public, my father would obsessively point out women with fake boobs like she had and women who wore clothing he deemed less than modest. Literally every time we left the house, it would come up. He'd call them "look at me girls," and warned me gravely never to be like them. I took everything my father ever said or did to heart. I was a dutiful wallflower, the kid who played alone at recess, who barely ever said a word. Even in my private moments, I never allowed myself to grieve my mother's absence. Fast forward to 8 years old. He remarried. They met online, which was uncommon back then. They dated for 3 months and got engaged. I hardly knew her. She was a poor single mother of one girl 2 years younger than me. eager to make a better life for the two of them. She had her daughter immediately get her last name legally changed and rushed to get us all committed to a church 3 days a week when we had never gone to church. The religious overhaul was intense, but I accepted them with a completely open heart. I was so excited to finally have a mom. She turned out to be horrifically short-tempered, verbally, emotionally, mentally, and physically abusive. In my 33 years, I still to this day have never met anyone so ready to fly off the handle. The tiniest thing would set her off, and she didn't hold back when my dad wasn't around. When he was around, she'd fake cry and lament about how horrible and ungrateful us kids were. His priority was always to soothe her, and he never stood up for me, and as he became more deeply entrenched in religious fanaticism, her abuse was excused, and my father began abusing us physically as well. So I'm taking out my pencil because I want to come back to some of this. I'll read the whole letter through, we'll go back again, how we do, and then I'll see if I can help. All right. My stepmother would snap and rage. My father would go cold and tell you to meet him at a certain time for your punishment. My older brother got the worst of it. No matter what, it was our job to apologize for upsetting her. The most maddening part about it is that I never stopped being the respectful, calm, sincere kid I always was, and it only seemed to infuriate her more. I never took her bait. I never stooped to her level. I never yelled back, not once. I would get stopped showing emotions on my face because even the smallest micro-expression would mean physical or verbal attack, usually both. I learned to keep my body language neutral. I became like a stone to survive, and I know I'll spend the rest of my life learning how to animate lovingly during a conflict. It got so bad that my brother ran away multiple times to sleep in abandoned buildings if he had to, just to get away. They never even looked for him. My relationship with my father truly changed forever when I got my first boyfriend, one of the only black boys at school, which actually meant we simply held hands in the hallway and sat together at lunch because my life outside of school was very strictly isolated from any kids outside our church. I should mention that the man my birth mother left my father for was also black. My dad ordered me to break up with my boyfriend immediately and stood staring with his arms crossed as my stepmom cornered me, hitting me anywhere she could, screaming, "How could you do this to him? How dare you?" And this was my first time ever saying anything other than "yes, sir." This was my first time ever openly disagreeing with them or anyone. I refused to break up with this boy for weeks, and the way I was treated during that time created a big fissure in my relationship with my father. It was the beginning of me unraveling the worldview they prescribed to me. When I turned 21, my birth mother found me on Facebook and sent me a message. She wanted to meet for lunch. I had moved out at 17, yes, but was still in contact with my parents. So I told my dad, who then told my stepmom, who then asked me about it while I was in the car with her one day. She wanted to know if I was going to meet with my birth mother. She asked really sweetly, to which I hesitantly admitted yes, that I couldn't not meet my mother. And she snapped and screamed at me while stepping on the gas, going faster and faster on the freeway, taking her eyes off the road to land backhanded slaps on me. Again, it was, "How dare you do this to me and your father?" Well, I went through with it. I met her. I met her way more than halfway for years. Got crumbs in return and eventually had to cut it off because she was putting in zero effort to be in my life or get to know me outside of when she needed something. It feels like her emotional maturity stopped developing around 13 years old. The final straw for me was that she didn't visit her mother as she was dying because it was too hard. She made the trip out after her mother died to rummage through their storage and take the valuable things she wanted, though. I explained to her how terrifying this behavior is to me, that I have zero reasons to trust that she's actually someone I'd be able to count on, ever. She reacted and flung a lot of weird, inaccurate victim narrative stuff at me that had nothing to do with us, and that was the end. That was 4 years ago. And just to recap, somewhere around 5 or so years ago, I was formally disowned by my father via email. After years of my reaching out and being ignored, it's my fault for not fixing the family dynamic, he says, and they cannot be unequally yoked with a non-believer. My brother is disowned too. The weird thing is there have been times here and there when I've had my father alone and he reveals a lot of love to me and regret for marrying my stepmom. He said, I never would have married her if I knew she would be like this, but their belief system says the only valid grounds for divorce is adultery. And then he goes cold and refuses to talk to me once my stepmom is present. Her daughter has not been disowned, of course, even though she is just as toxic and explosive as her mother and has never had to be without all of the resources and stability that unconditional approval provides. So my questions are, should I still keep trying to get through to my dad? Life is always shorter than you think, and I can't stand there being such a chasm between us. He's all that I ever had, and I don't know how to fix this. I can't move forward without acknowledgement of what is unhealthy behavior and collaboration on what healthy behavior can look like. But I can't even break through the stepmom firewall to do that. But is it the right thing to just keep trying? It injures me deeply every time I try, but once I heal, I immediately want to try again. His mother disowned him multiple times in life, and I want to disrupt the cycle for him and for me. Second question, how do I forgive them? None of them will ever apologize or even acknowledge abuse. I know forgiveness is a gift to myself to give permission to let it all go. And to be honest, most days it truly feels like I have. I'm able to be a really bright light in this world most of the time. But when my tank is low, when I'm exhausted by the struggle, I relive the abuse on those days because my inner voice sounds just like them. I feel like a forgettable failure who should do everyone a favor and disappear already. I've been exposed to beautiful humans and mothers, and through them, I'm learning how to speak kindly to myself. But I think that forgiving my parents is the other part, right? I want their assessments of me and vicious words for me to lose their power. I'm still deeply hurt because their neglect and abandonment continues. And I'm sorry to say this because it goes against everything I want to be in this world, but I think I actually hate my stepmother. I don't know how to ever truly forgive her deep down. Your insight would be so greatly appreciated. Thank you, Veronica. This is one of the hardest letters I've read. I've heard accounts of terrible abuse before. But what's hard for me is how much I admire and relate to your resilience, Veronica, and the way you want to hold on to this. And I want to treat how you feel about this with all respect. I'm not going to try to talk you out of your feelings. I'm just going to see if I can help you come to peace and a good strategy for what it is you want out of this. I think it's fair what you want. It might be kind of hopeless, but it's fair. All right. So let's go through. All right. Your birth mother left when you were 1. Right there. Huge abandonment. You might not remember it, but your nervous system remembers it. So I'm so proud of you for functioning so well in the world despite that. She left for another man who became her pimp. All right. She had visitation rights but never used them. She sounds like an addict. You didn't mention that, I think, but that sounds like a serious addict who behaves this way or who needs to, use prostitution for a living. So it was forbidden to ever say her name, ask questions. There were no pictures. You were told she's not here because she doesn't love you and she doesn't want to be your mom. I on one hand, I can hear your dad was devastated by what happened. I'm sure with 2 little kids, that was a horrible time in his life. And yes, he handled it really badly. It sounds like either he didn't know or didn't care, the very common universal advice not to lay this on kids and not to make them hate their parents and not to be telling them all the time the real reasons why the marriage broke down. In this case, sometimes drugs are a reason to tell kids, well, they have an addiction, they can't do that right now. But to tell a kid that their mom doesn't love them or want to be their mom, and it sounds like it might have been that because your encounter with her later, it sounds like either like a sociopath who is not capable of empathy or somebody who's been driven to those tendencies by decades of drug use. And I just have a lot of drug use in my family, so I know what that looks like, and it looks like that. All right. It doesn't excuse it. like we know that somebody who falls into addiction maybe can't control it, and there's some part of them that would do better if they could, but that all the same, the damage is the damage, and the damage done to a child is done. So I'm so sorry that that happened to you. And then you got punished for making facial expressions that looked like her. Okay, this is where your dad really crosses the line. And when you mentioned that your stepmom was stuck at the age of 13, your dad sounds like he's stuck at something like 15. You know, not much better. That's so immature to punish a child for having a family resemblance to somebody who hurt them. An adult should know better and should understand that that has nothing to do with you, what happened with DNA there. And by the way, the person who chose to have a kid with her was him. So I just, you know, I'm just saying it. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't have the spiritual, moral, or emotional capacity to have a clue about how to talk to a child about that. So you were given these terrible messages that somehow you were doing something wrong. You were left to stand in the mirror and search your face for which expression was the wrong one. And the way you describe this, it just, like, I just understand to my bones what you're talking about. The disgust, the visceral degree of disgust when you see her resemblance. And then your father's pain about her fake boobs and the immodest dress. And I mean, she did go off and become a prostitute. So I can imagine that was totally devastating to him. And it just sounds like he's somebody who just never could really quite process and contain what happened. I'm not excusing him, but just as an outside perspective, it's like he sounds like he's really, really messed up, and I wouldn't doubt very traumatized himself. But I don't excuse us, I don't excuse him. When we hurt people, we have to be responsible for that. So he is responsible whether he admits it or not. I just want to tell you that, Veronica. He is responsible. He can't admit it because he's not capable of being honest with himself or with you. But he is responsible, and you're right. Okay, you're right. He is. He did that. He did that, and he hurt you. Okay. All right. So then he goes into online dating and meets somebody, gets engaged in 3 months, and this woman who was, you guys were doing okay financially. This woman was not. She comes in with her daughter, and your perception, it sounds like from what you're describing, she immediately changed her kid's name, rushed everybody into the church. So she grabbed everything and conformed it very quickly. Now, a psychologically healthy person would not like take kids and smash them together into a brand new culture because of her will. And I'm not a therapist or a doctor, so I can't diagnose anybody, but everything you describe about her sounds like narcissistic abuse. And I don't talk about that very much. That's a big topic for people in our community where we talk about complex PTSD. I talk about it occasionally. I reference it because I know it's important to you. I've spotted it occasionally, but this is so extreme. So you all had to go 3 times a week. Your dad conformed to it. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, what I see your dad at this juncture is he became somebody with an abusive partner. He just has all that syndrome of like, he can't speak for himself. He can't have his own opinions. He can't have his own life. He can't have his own beliefs. He can't even have his own kids. He got pressure. And this is something that is sometimes part of narcissistic abuse in a step-parent, is they want to eradicate the previous kids. They don't like how that does their mojo with their own kid. And it makes them feel unimportant in some way. And so they want that gone. And even when you were allowed to be in the house, even when you were allowed to be in contact, oh, Veronica, they were erasing you. They erased you and erased you. And that's one reason why I loved your art so much. It's because your art is so powerful and definite, and it's like declared, you know, this feeling and this image. It's real. You are real. And I saw images of you there too. And all of the family resemblance that might carry through with you and your unique self. So, wow, this woman. Okay. So I get it. You accepted them completely with that little girl open heart. Oh, I got a mom. I'll do anything. I'll do anything. I'll get into whatever she wants me to get into. But she turned out to be horrifically short-tempered, verbally, emotionally, mentally, and physically abusive. And you're 33 now, and you've never met anyone so ready to fly off the handle. And you know, gosh, it's just like this Dickensian misfortune that your dad should marry the person who is like that. I'm so sorry. You know, sometimes I think when the abuse was extreme like that, at least it's not ambiguous, and the lack of ambiguity is at least one little silver lining, that it's just like, hands down, you did not cause this, it's not your fault, and everything you can do to 100% get her out of your consciousness is good. So the tiniest thing would set her off. She didn't hold back when your dad wasn't around, classic. When he was around, she'd cry and lament about how horrible and ungrateful the kids were. His priority was always to soothe her, and he never stood up. Yeah, he sounds like an abused partner. He sounds like he's completely dominated and controlled. And then he became more deeply entrenched in the religious fanaticism. And you know, I'm just going to say strongly, religion for families and for individuals can be an immensely positive, good, healing thing. It's not inherently bad. It's like all environments where there's some ideas or ideology with it. You put it in the hands of an abusive narcissist, and it is used to damage and control and just, I'm going to say a swear word, guys, mind fuck the kids, all right? Her abuse was excused. Your dad even began physically abusing you as well. Stepmother would snap and rage, dad would go cold. You'd have to meet him at a certain time for punishment. Oh boy, how psychologically manipulative. Older brother got the worst of it. No matter what, it was our job to apologize for upsetting her. Okay, that's when I was like, that sure sounds like a narcissist to me. The most maddening part of it is that I never stopped being the respectful, calm, sincere kid I always was. Respectful, calm, sincere kid. How beautiful. How beautiful. How incredibly strong and resilient you are. You always were that person, and I have a hunch you are now. The way that you've laid out this story is respectful, calm, and sincere. So it just goes to show. It just goes to show. You kept your spirit intact. And whatever coping mechanisms you had to develop at the time, I'm so glad you did, because here you are. Here you are. So the more you were respectful, calm, and sincere, it infuriated her more. But you didn't take the bait. You never stooped to her level. You never yelled back, not once. Okay, in a way that's commendable, but I bet there's some suppressed anger there that you haven't had a chance to fully express. I would get painted into a corner of going mute because anything I said would set her off more. I know a lot of people in the audience are going to start crying at this point. I stopped showing emotions on my face because even the smallest micro-expression would mean physical or verbal attack, usually both. I learned to keep my body language neutral. I became like a stone to survive, and I know I'll spend the rest of my life learning how to, I circled this, how to animate lovingly during conflict. And I've never heard anybody put words to that, but I know exactly what you mean. If you freeze and turn to stone in a conflict to try not to show anything, that you have to allow yourself to animate lovingly. I totally hear you. I think that's brilliant. I hope everybody can take that as an example. If you're somebody who freezes, who wasn't allowed to express emotions, this is a perfect example of how we use these strategies to protect ourselves as children, to go cold and stone-like, and then grow up and begin to peel off the layers and learn to animate lovingly. And there it is. It got so bad that my brother ran away multiple times to sleep in abandoned buildings, and they never even looked for him. That made me so sad too. I can't even bear to think of my kids being in such a position. My relationship with my father truly changed forever when I got my first boyfriend. He was one of the only black boys at school, and because it was at school and your life was controlled, it meant you could hold hands at lunch or hang out, but you couldn't hang out after school, so it was a very innocent little thing. And this giant abusive attack of a racist nature came flying at you. I feel like they would have found anything at all to attack you. But for them, conveniently, he was black, your mother had left for a black guy, your dad has this inability to separate your mother from you, so conflates the whole thing. Although, I don't know, from what I'm hearing, it almost could have been anyone, but it had that extra element. and you got slapped and hit and screamed at. How could you do this to him? You were doing something to him, but your mother said it on behalf of him. So her trip that everybody exists to make her look good, she's now extended your father into part of her, facade. And how could you do that to him and make it look to him? I'm so glad you had a boyfriend. I'm just so glad you had somebody to hold your hand in school while all this was going on. It's hard for me to get through this. This is so sad. And then it was the first time you said anything other than, yes, sir. So you disagreed openly and you refused to break up. And the way you were treated during that time created a huge fissure in your relationship with your dad, and it was the beginning of the unraveling of the worldview they told you to have. So good. Thank you, high school boyfriend, for helping that begin. All right. When I turned 21, my birth mother found me on Facebook, and okay, here comes the next chapter of your resilient spirit encountering a life of hardship. And it turns out she's a selfish, horrible taker. Wanted to see you, but turned out just to want something from you. Then you tell your stepmom, and she does something that's one of my worst hated types of abuse. And I don't know what the fancy word for it is, but it's driving crazy. Holding people hostage in the car while driving crazy. Faster and faster, terrifying you, taking eyes off the road. That was something that happened to me when I was a kid, and I have kind of never got over it. I had an experience over the summer where somebody was driving crazy. People were arguing. Somebody grabbed the wheel from the other person, and I just completely went into a emotional flashback. I don't think I've been so dysregulated in years. It was so upsetting to me. And later, as I kind of came back through using my daily practice and talking it out, and it was a really difficult thing, actually, because people didn't understand why I was acting so weird. I was being very unreasonable. I wanted to get out of the car and hitchhike home, which was stupid. People didn't understand what was going on with me. It was so out of character at this point in my life, but you understand, I bet. You know the feeling, the desperation to get out of the car. So you met your stepmom, and yeah, she was like 13 years old. The final straw was she didn't visit her mom when she was dying because it was too hard, but did go to the storage unit. Yes, I have a relative like that as well. And that was 4 years ago. You just let it end. So at least we know now that your dad would marry somebody like that and not see it coming. So we're starting to, I in no way am trying to excuse him or get you to have sympathy for him. I'm just like, noted. He married a person who was completely self-absorbed. I mentioned, she sounds like a drug addict to me, like a hardcore drug addict, like it's heroin or crack or meth or something. And that's what happens, that your soul just goes and it's all about getting stuff. In fact, I'm guessing it's not heroin. It's one of the other two. And just to recap, somewhere around 5 years ago, your dad disowns you. Now what? Oh my gosh. I'm not really laughing, but I'm laughing so I don't cry. You were formally disowned via email. He is totally under a spell now. It's very sad. I'm sad for him. It's his loss, because he's the one who's coming later in life. He's, he's going to live to regret this. After years of you reaching out and being ignored, he said it's your fault for not fixing the family dynamic, and they cannot be unequally yoked with a non-believer. So again, that is the most twisted perversion of a religious message that you have to cut off your family. When something purports to be a religion, I presume this is Christian, and there's so many wonderful Christians, I just want to say that. But like everything, including people who are just totally atheist, or they believe in an economic system so fanatically, or they, political stuff. We have, where I live, there's a lot of people who are fanatical about political issues to the point that it's abusive to the kids. And that's what it is. When you are pressured to cut off people in your life or your family, your own children, you are in a cult. You're in a cult. And cults are always run by a charismatic narcissist abuser. And so somebody's under a spell here, and it sounds like your stepmom has really facilitated this total brainwashing of your dad to actually give up everything that matters in his life. And it's sad and tragic, and it makes me angry. But what can we do? Let's figure it out. Okay, your brother's disowned too. Well, good. Now you have each other, right? And the weird thing is, there have been times here and there when you've had your dad alone and he reveals a lot of love to you. Okay, hold on to that. And regret for marrying her, but he thinks he can't. He says he never would have married her if he knew she would be like this. Yep, but see, he had a broken red flag detector. We know where that comes from. He couldn't see it coming, and now he's so psychologically helpless and vulnerable. He'd rather believe this ideology that you know the only grounds for divorce is adultery. It almost made me think, well, go commit adultery quick, run, you know, so you have your grounds. But I've studied a lot of religions, and it is very rare that any religion would condone abuse of one partner by another. It happens, though. Abuse is condoned, and here we are. I don't even know. You hadn't made clear. I don't know if their church knows how abusive she is or what's really going on here. But at this point, well, who cares, right? It's kind of one of those things you have to just go, okay, whatever, you guys. They are right now, they're the hardware store. If you know that phrase, don't go to the hardware store for milk. So all of that is your hardware store. You need milk. So forget the hardware store. Once your stepmom's present, he goes cold and refuses to talk to you. Her daughter has not been disowned, of course, even though she's just as toxic and explosive as her mother. Yeah, I'm not surprised. In a way, being cut out of that family makes you the lucky one, as much as it messes with your mind, like, why me, why me, why am I being scapegoated and made the bad child? You're the lucky one. I hate to think how she's going to fare in life like this. And that young woman has never had to be without all the resources and stability that unconditional approval provides. Yeah, well, but she's also got total mind control and crazy rationalizations. I'm just so proud of you. You left at 17. You've honorably tried to maintain relationships, Veronica. And you've managed to be a light in the world. And so, hands down, you win. You win. You win over all these characters in this story. Like, how did such a lovely person emerge like a lotus from this filthy water of people being hateful? So your question is, should you still try to get through to your dad? Life is short. He's all you've ever had, and you don't know how to fix it. And so I'm just going to give you a certain comfort here that it's not for you to fix. You cannot fix it. You can't fix him or that dynamic. I'm going to suggest to you that you find a way to communicate with him where she can't filter it. She's not present. She can't see a note. However it is you manage to get this message to him, to take your temporary leave from him and just say, I'm very hurt what's going on. I will respect your wish to stay out of your life, but I want you to know, Dad, I love you. And if you ever change your mind, I'm right here. And I would really love to have a relationship with you. And now you've said your piece, and he knows that, and he'll remember, and perhaps if he changes his mind. And what that gives you is freedom to forget about it. And I would encourage you to really put it out of your mind as much as you can. And I know every time Christmas comes, you're going to be reminded, and you'll deal with that as it comes. And if you don't have tools for that, my daily practice, that is what it's for. It's a thing you do daily so that all the little things that come up and start popping holes through the old traumas, and it comes up like a volcano suddenly into your emotions. You have a way to keep processing that stuff every morning, every evening. You just keep going, and it gets easier. It starts to not feel like a volcano. It's more just like a stream that runs through your life, and you know where it is and you don't step in it. You just go visit and sit by the side of it every day and write what those thoughts are, the fearful and resentful thoughts, and then you rest in meditation. And you're going to think to yourself, that sounds too simple for this, but trust me, it's deceptively simple. It's very powerful, and you might want to give it a try. It's a free course for anybody who wants to try it. There's always a link down below in the free tools link below my videos. So you can try that to cope with the feelings that are going to come up as you go ahead and stop trying. Sometimes I think trying to retrieve a relationship, like intellectually, you know, there's nothing you can do, but it's the trying that comforts you. But it also then turns around and bites you in the butt. It feels terrible to try and get rejected again. And I totally know the feeling where every time you get that rejection, it feels like a little bit of a surprise, and everyone around you like, why is it a surprise? I've seen this happen again and again. That's what they do. But hope springs eternal, and that hope is a beautiful part of you. You get to have that, but just practice letting go of the relationship. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he comes around in some way and is able to express his love for you. You know it's there. He's admitted it to you. He does love you. He's right now under the spell of a very bad person, and he's being controlled, and he's not allowed to really communicate with you. That's what's going on. Your second question is, how do you forgive them? And they won't apologize or even acknowledge abuse. And you know what? That's not uncommon. That's most abusers. I will say that nobody from my childhood has ever apologized to me except one person, my brother, who did some of the worst abuse. And he apologized. And he apologized just a couple months before he died suddenly. So how about that? I'm glad he did. And it was good to know. I've had a couple of quality apologies from people before, out of maybe 100 that I feel that I'm owed. And I've gone and been as thorough as I can to apologize to other people, and I've made peace with the fact that most people don't really have the insight or the strength or the capacity to do that, or they can't do it properly. And I'll tell you, when you've hurt your kids as bad as your parents have hurt you, it takes a lot of courage and some kind of deep transformation inside to even get to a place where you could look at what you've done. Because really, like, think how it would feel for them to actually face what they've done. The remorse would be huge. Now, I know from going through my own processes of reconciliation with myself and things I've done, it feels really good. It's a huge relief when you finally face what it is. And I can honestly say I've never done anything near the caliber of what these parents have done to you. But what I did do was enough that I felt terrible about myself. I never really could hold my head up. And certain things happened from within me, and somehow maybe divinely helped me to come into awareness that I needed to set some things straight. And it felt really good, actually. So all the years I had sort of avoided looking at myself, it was unnecessary, but I wasn't ready. So I really hope that your dad will become ready one day. It sounds like your stepmom, good riddance. Hopefully you never have to see her again. Your birth mom, yeah, sounds like that's not going anywhere either, but your dad is the one you had. It's the parental attachment you have. And for the sake of future relationships, I know it's important for you to have some healing around your love for your dad, even if he can never show up for you, even if he can never do it. So I wanted to just kind of address a couple things that you are mentioning here, where you said, I know forgiveness is a gift to myself. And I'm just going to say, no, I don't see it that way. Forgiveness is a natural consequence when you have less fear and resentment about things which cannot be manufactured. And in my experience, you can aim for forgiveness. You can discover sometimes that your heart just suddenly has let something go. Like sometimes forgiveness just visits you. I always say it's sort of like a light, gentle snow that's not even cold, and you just sort of wake up and you're just like, oh, look, snow. And you just realize you don't have this feeling of contempt in your heart anymore. It's been removed. That happens sometimes. You could call that by grace. You could try to will yourself to forgive, and I think sometimes there are certain situations where you should just do that. You should just go, okay, fine. I don't want to fight about it anymore. That's something like forgiveness. But the most beautiful thing is when you have really faced the details of your fearful and resentful thoughts about who you are, about your life, about what all this means about you. That's what my practice is about. It's about just line by line facing, I have fear, I'm damaged forever, fear I can never be good, fear this will affect my relationships, fear they don't even care about me. I'm resentful at my stepmom because I have fear she totally controlled my dad, fear she hit me, fear she shamed me, fear I'm confused now about what's really okay. I'm making up what I might write if I were in your shoes. Then you ask for it to be removed, and then you rest in meditation. And it doesn't change other people, but it allows you to relax into yourself a little bit, to just relax into peace a little bit. These resentful, fearful thoughts have a way of spinning in our minds like a hamster wheel. They also have a way of driving our decisions, coloring our perceptions, making it hard to understand. And then, you know, we're doing odd things like in rebellion to something that we don't even remember happened, or we're avoiding something that we thought we can't handle, but we can handle. And it's just some old fear there. So less of that clutter, more just you being you being that calm, steady, alert girl with bright eyes that you always were, you being that girl who grew up to create the art you make, who sees beauty and strength in people. Extraordinary work. I'm so proud of you. I'm so impressed with you. Your vision is all intact. That's good. So you don't want to hate your stepmom. I know, I gotta admit, I kind of hate your stepmom. And I know we're not supposed to hate, but that's how I feel right now. But here's what has happened. And I have some corollary people in my life, but here's what has happened. Less fear, less resentment. Sometimes I see the hurtful people in my life as just like pitiful things or insignificant things. Sometimes I just forget about them. Sometimes I'm just no longer at the effect of them. It's harder when they're married to your dad and you love your dad. But more neutrality. Consider, instead of forgiveness, neutrality as a place to aim, and see if forgiveness just doesn't lay all over you one morning when you wake up like a light snow that isn't even cold, that it just arrives. And I would let go of any idea that you must forgive to heal. And the really big idea that I'm going to encourage you to let go of, you said, I want their assessments of me and vicious words for me to lose their power. Yes, and they will lose their power, but here's the secret. They're not involved in that process. They're not capable of it. They're too messed up to somehow come back and take the power out of what they said for you. And in fact, even if they were to apologize and get it, there's still this inside job. You're talking to me, you're sharing this story with me, you're doing the work, you are taking the power out of those words by your own knowledge and your own experience of yourself as somebody who is intact, unharmed, perfectly beautiful and good. They didn't see you at all. They didn't understand you at all. But I see you. And people here on this channel see you. I expect you're going to get a lot of love in the comments. You're still deeply hurt. Yes, I know. Yep. And it goes against everything. And I'm so glad that the beautiful people have showed you how to speak kindly to yourself. And speaking kindly to yourself is also one of the natural byproducts of actively shedding some of the fearful and resentful thoughts. Now again, when we write the fearful and resentful thoughts, we're not disavowing them, or we're not denying that we have them. We're just writing them down. We're admitting it. It's like, I have fear, you know, I just have this feeling. And I ask for it to be removed and I get a little vacation from it. But because I'm human, I get more fear. I get more fear after a little while. It's sort of like a continuous, it's a stream that runs through my life, right? It's always there. Another metaphor I use is my life is a leaky boat, and in the leaks comes this water that needs to be scooped out with my little cup, you know, fairly regularly, of the fearful and resentful thoughts. A boat that's bogged down with water can't really go anywhere. And so you keep your boat relatively free of leaky water, but it always comes back in. But I will say, if you stay steady with this practice, it gradually gets better. It's not just like the same thing every day. It's gradually helping you, you know, have a leaky boat in a much nicer place. So we're only human. The most important thing that I want to address in what you said is you said your inner voice sounds just like them, and you feel like a forgettable failure who should do everyone a favor and disappear already. I understand that so much. I understand that so much, and that is the inner voice of somebody who was resented for existing as a child. Okay, I have that. They resented your existence, and that's where that idea came that you would do everybody a favor and disappear. These people don't deserve to be the determiners of whether you belong in this world. And here's the most beautiful awakening you can have, and I hope you have it, and I'm just going to share that this happened for me and that I wouldn't be here without it. But I had an experience that made me realize that my worth in this world and my right to exist have nothing to do with my mother's opinion of me, just as yours has nothing to do with their opinion of you. Your existence in this world and right to exist is your birthright. You were born with it. Your life is important. What you have done with your life is beautiful and good. And I see, you're not kidding. You are a light in this world. So if I can be one voice, just validating you and countering that inner voice inside that was there that just says, it would just be so much better if you didn't exist. It's really good that you do. For people watching this, if you feel ready to take your next steps, there are free tools down below. You can click the link just below this video in the description section. There's quizzes, there's a free course. I have other courses, I have coaching. If you love this topic about how to come to peace with abusive parents, I have this video right here, and I will see you very soon.